Hey everyone, this is Mr. Fink doing a supplemental video for Grammar Unit 1, Part B, and that would be underlining and using italics versus using quotation marks for titles of different things. Now I have underlining / italics because either one of those is acceptable. So I always say if you're handwriting something and it should be in italics, well, I don't really want you to slant your handwriting to make it look like you're writing in italics. So you're going to underline it. But most of the time, if you have the option and you can, you're going to use italics. So those are like interchangeable, the underlining and the italics. The other side of the coin are using quotation marks. So there are certain instances where you use the underlining and italics, and there's some instances where you use the quotation marks. Let's go over a couple of rules before we get started. All right. So like I just mentioned, two things to remember. Number one says that italics and underlining are the same thing. So they are interchangeable. But again, italics is the preferred method if you have the option. Number two, this is your little memory trick, your little mnemonic if you want to. Quotation marks are usually for short things. I put the word works because I don't want to just say books. So short works get quotation marks, or if there's something that appears in a larger work, and then if it's italics, it would be from a longer work. All right, well, what does that look like? What does that mean? So the next two slides are going to list every time that you use italics, and then the next slide after that is going to be every time that you use quotation marks for a title. Now, some of these are very obscure. I don't want you to have to remember these. So what you're going to focus on is you're going to focus on the ones that are in bold. The ones that are in bold are the ones that I'm requiring you to know for English class. The other ones, is it nice to know a couple of them? Sure, but it's not required. So let's get started. All right, like I said, long list here. When do I underline or italicize? So the first 7 things listed there are the ones that you really need to know for this class. Those are books, plays, magazines, newspapers, films, TV shows, and websites. So it would be the names of any of those things. And I gave you an example of each one. Okay. But, obviously there's thousands and millions of other examples that I could have given. So those are the main ones that I would like you to know for this class. Obviously, books and plays, because we'll be reading those this year. Magazines, newspapers, we'll be using them a lot when we do our research paper. Films, TV shows, websites, just pop culture stuff that you'll use frequently throughout the year in this class and other classes. The ones that are not in bold, yeah, is it nice to know that, like, if you were in history class and you were talking about a boat or an aircraft or a train or a spacecraft that has a specific name to it, like the example I give there is like the USS New Jersey, or if you're talking about the Titanic, yeah, that would get an italics as you're saying that. But in this class, you really don't need to know that. Okay. Like I said, this is just extra information, but the bolded ones are the ones you definitely want to remember. And again, think of them like big things. It's going to take you, multiple days probably to read a book. It's going to take you hours to watch a movie. It's going to take you hours to watch a play. If you were to watch an entire, complete television show, every season, every episode from beginning to end, that's going to take you a long time. So think about these as big items. If you need a few extra seconds, you can always pause this video to copy these down. But again, really only necessary to copy down the ones that are in bold before we move on to the next one. Now this slide is much shorter. This is when you use quotation marks. And again, I'm only asking you to really focus on the 4 that are in bold on the left-hand side. Those things would be essays, so the titles of essays, titles of articles, short stories, and short poems. Those are the ones I'd like you to remember for English class. Again, we're using a lot of these when it comes to the research paper this year. Short stories, it's actually the first thing we're going to do this year. So when we're addressing these different short stories, they got to be in quotation marks. Because again, when you're reading a short story, it's short. So you're going to probably be able to do it in one sitting. It may only take you a few minutes, maybe a half an hour to read a short story, depending on how long it is. Same thing for an article, whether it's an online article in a magazine, in a newspaper, that's easily digestible in one sitting. Okay. Again, if you know that chapters of books get quotation marks, great. If you know that famous speeches or lectures get quotation marks, that's great. But really, what I'm focusing on there is those 4 that are listed there. Okay. And again, think of them as shorter, think of them as part of a larger work. So an essay would appear in a journal, an article would appear in a magazine or on a website or in a newspaper. A short story is probably going to appear in a collection of short stories. So it's a part of a larger work. All right. So that's pretty much it for this one. Like I said, this is something I do first. One, because it is something we use all the entire school year. And number 2, it's small enough that I think I can pair it up with the capitalization and it makes sort of one complete unit. All right. So hopefully you've taken down some notes, and that is all for this grammar lesson 1B.